What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you a look at indie CRPG Swordhaven Iron Conspiracy. Now, this is not the first time I've taken a look at this game. I actually checked out a demo of it all the way back in, I think it was May, as part of a Steam Next Fest. But Swordhaven was actually a Kickstarter project that I personally backed, and that was because this is from the same team that brought us Atom RPG. And where that game was heavily inspired by Fallout, Swordhaven here appears to be heavily inspired by Baldur's Gate, if the Iron Conspiracy subtitle wasn't enough for you. But that said, for the people that backed this on Kickstarter, you got emailed a key for it, which is how I am accessing the early access period. And for everyone else, it looks like they're charging it's $25 US. Currently on a small launch discount, though. But what do you actually get for that, and what is this game all about? Well, Swordhaven is set on the island of Nova Draconia, where we're going to be guiding our main character plus a party as they move to unravel a conspiracy that unfolds before your eyes, related to what makes this island special. You see, Nova Draconia isn't just any old island, but rather a very special ore was discovered here, known as pale iron or balta ore. This has inspired all sorts of adventurers and the like to show up to the island, yourself included, but you happen to, naturally, as the ship gets wrecked, meet a dying man who thrusts upon you a magical amulet of some description and tells you to bring it to someone in the town of Swordhaven, which gets you into the rest of the game proper. Though, first you have to get through character creation, which is pretty solid actually. So, the first thing you'll do is pick a background, a noble, adventurer, or bandit, and from what I understand, these are more than just background choices. They will actually relate to content in-game, with there being mention of specific dungeons for these particular backgrounds, but each of them conveys a bonus to an attribute as well as several different skills. Now, when we pick our attributes, you'll probably notice that it's very similar to the special system from Fallout, but generally we'll be able to spend a few attribute points on any of these or take away from others. Each of them does pretty much what you'd expect and governs both a main thing as well as a whole host of skills that you'll be able to see. Now, like tends to be the case with systems like this, intellect is especially useful because it gives you potentially up to double the normal amount of skill points, meaning that you'll be able to much more quickly get your skills, including your ability with the different melee weapons and the like. So I'll be curious to see if they fine-tune any of that. But then you can actually spend some skill points between a whole host of different combat skills on top of the usual stuff like intimidation, persuasion, bluff, outdoorsmanship, stealth, lockpicking, and even some of the crafting system here. Now, as you increase these skills, you'll gain ranks in them, which is going to determine overall how good you are with them. So for instance, when you're lockpicking, certain locks will require a minimum rank here, but generally, the better you are at something, the better you will be at it, and once you start leveling up, you'll put more points per level into these skills, which is how you'll improve them. And it looks like your attributes are mostly set in stone after this, with not much seeming to adjust them. But then we have our distinctions. These are your standard take a positive for a negative that will help you determine who your character is a little bit, though typically the detriment is pretty significant and you don't have to take these at all. But then you'll pick abilities. So abilities are pretty much combat abilities. Now, so far everything seems to be very heavily oriented on various types of melee combat and then ranged combat via bows and whatnot. So I don't know if there will be like any prevailing magical ability when it comes to combat, because currently magic is mentioned. You'll actually meet someone who can cast a little bit of magic, but thus far I haven't seen any ability on our end to use it. But these abilities will be what we are using in combat, because the more skill you have with a particular subsection of weaponry, you'll be able to pick up skills for it and then of course use those in combat. Typically at the cost of increased action points in comparison to just attacking generally. And then finally, the cosmetic character creator. Probably not going to blow anybody's expectations out of the water. It's a little basic, but you can customize roughly what your character will look like. And then finally, difficulty. Currently, it looks like they're just working on normal, and the later two that are planned, easy and hard, will be available later, which isn't uncommon for early access, mind you. And then we can get started on the game proper. Now, if you've ever played an isometric CRPG before, you kind of get the gist here, but speaking of camera angle, you can actually also choose early on whether or not you want a traditional isometric camera with just a few set options in terms of rotating the camera, or you can choose to go full 3D top down, or mostly top down, So it's nice to have options there, but gameplay-wise, this is pretty much what you would expect. You start off on a beach with a very temporary companion that can help you take out some of the nearby enemies, which are mostly just lizards, before heading to the nearby town of Clams Reach. And this is where your options start opening up a bit. You'll be able to explore and put some of your skills to good use, such as sneaking around or simply finding alternative routes through quests, because once you reach this town, if you want to stop and talk to the locals, you'll have the potential to do some favors for them. For starters, they've been hassled by barbarians outside of their town, and they're here because somebody in the town supposedly killed one of their members, but no one knows who that is, and so you have to get to the bottom of that. And there's a few different ways to go about questing, so it looks like choice and consequence will play a pretty significant role here in both how you talk to individuals, resulting in how they respond to you, but also just in how you approach quests generally, which, having played Atom RPG, comes as no real surprise, mind you, but definitely worth mentioning. Now, one way or another, you're pretty likely to wind up in combat, and happy to report that combat is a mix of either turn-based or real-time with pause. You can toggle that and choose between one or the other if you want, but either way, this is determined by action points. Every round, if you will, your character gets a set amount of action points that they can spend on attacking or using their abilities or, of course, items. This part specifically, I would say, definitely feels a little janky for sure, and I think this is likely where a significant amount of early access feedback will come into play, especially because with most of the combat coming down to various forms of melee, it might be difficult to make this compelling, especially in 2024 here when we're actually starting to see CRPGs with really good combat systems. But this is an indie game, so probably not going to be make or break for people, I imagine, but we'll see what happens. But on top of things like that, there's a full-blown crafting system. You'll be picking up materials that you can then turn into things that are actually useful. You can even invest skill points into being good at that. And while you're out harvesting materials, you may just notice that these individual maps that the game has are fairly large and full of people to talk to, at least the cities, mind you. But once you're finally done in this particular early town, you might finally mosey your way onto the world map, which looks to be one of those old grid-based systems we used to see a lot, but not so much anymore. But the world map will be full of things like random encounters and the like that you'll have to watch out for and be mindful of. But all in all, so far here at the early access stage of this particular game, it looks like Swordhaven has come a fairly long way just from that demo I checked out a while back earlier this year, and it's shaping up to be something interesting. And while I don't think indie CRPGs like this will ever likely receive any sort of mass appeal, if you enjoy the classics especially, this looks to be a really good approach to that. A lot of non-linearity, a whole host of choice and consequence just from what I experienced in this, and while you can't play the entire game right now, just roughly the first 10 or so hours, I like what I see thus far, and as it continues to progress and eventually heads towards a release date, which they are shooting for late 2025, but we'll see what happens, then I will take a look at it and fully review it, so certainly feel free to stick around for that. But that is just about going to do it for today's video. As always, when it comes to early access games, you have to make that decision for yourself. But much like Atom RPG, I think Swordhaven is shaping up to be a sort of hidden gem situation. But certainly let me know how you feel about it down in the comments section below, which of course means to like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz. And regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.